When the dust settled. Chapter 1. The unraveling Sarah's hands trembled as she held the bank statement, the paper crackling between her fingers like autumn leaves. The numbers blurred through her tears, but the truth remained stark. Zero zeros. Every account emptied, every investment liquidated. 23 years of marriage reduced to a zero balance. The kitchen still smelled of the morning coffee she'd made for Tom dark roast with a hint of cinnamon, just how he liked it. The mug sat abandoned on the counter, lipstick marks on the rim, where she'd stolen a sip while making his eggs. Such an ordinary morning, until she'd decided to check their finances to plan for their daughter Emma's college tuition. Tom. Her voice echoed through the farmhouse, bouncing off walls that had heard 23 years of conversations, arguments, laughter, and nonchalance. She found him in their bedroom, his military-style duffel bag on the bed, clothes folded with the same precision he brought to everything. Everything except their marriage, apparently. "You're awake," he said without looking up, placing his shaving kit into the bag's side pocket. The account Sarah's voice caught. "Tom, where's our money?" He finally met her eyes, and she saw it then. The cold. Calculation she'd mistaken for determination all these years. "It's not our money anymore, Sarah. It never really was." "What are you talking about?" The bank statement crumpled in her fist. "I worked just as hard as you did. The farm, the business that's in my name." He zipped the bag with a finality that made her stomach drop. "The accounts that only have my name on them. You were always too trusting, Sarah. Too naive. We built this together." The words tore from her throat. Every morning at 4 a.m., every market day ever you helped, he shouldered the bag. "But helping isn't owning. I've met someone who understands ambition, who doesn't just want to play farmer's wife forever." Farmer's wife? Sarah's legs felt weak. "Is that all I've been to you?" Tom paused at the bedroom door. "Linda understands the bigger picture. She has connections, vision. He looked around the room with its handmade quilts and family photos. "You just wanted to play house, Linda? Your business partner, Linda?" The betrayal hit her in waves. The late meetings, the conferences, the phone calls he'd take. Outside. "How long? Does it matter?" He pulled out a manila envelope from his jacket. "The farm's yours. Can't sell it anyway, it's been in your family for generations. But everything else comes with me. The equipment's leased in the company name. The vehicles are company property. Even the chickens technically belong to the business." Sarah snatched the envelope, her hands shaking so violently she could barely open it. "Divorce papers, already filled out. You planned this for months. No shame, no guilt, just that cold efficiency. My lawyer says you can contest it, but that'll take money you don't have. Sign them, Sarah. Make this easy on yourself, easy." She laughed, but it came out as a sob. "You're stealing 23 years of my life and you want to make it easy? I'm taking what's mine." He moved past her, his cologne, the one she'd bought him last Christmas, making her nauseous. "The house has no mortgage. You've got a roof over your head. That's more than most get." She followed him downstairs, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden steps. "Tom, please, let's talk about this. We can work through whatever. There's nothing to work through." He grabbed his keys from the bowl shed made in that pottery class he'd mocked. "I've already moved the business operations to Linda's place in Chicago. The contracts, the client lists, everything. You can't just—" She grabbed his arm, but he shook her, off like she was nothing more than a cobweb. "Watch me!" He opened the front door, October wind whipping through the house. "Oh, and Sarah? The electricity and water are on auto-pay from the business account. That ends today. Might want to figure something out, Tom." But he was already loading his bag into the new truck, the one they'd bought to expand deliveries. She ran after him, gravel cutting into her bare feet. "You can't leave me with nothing! It's October! Winter's coming!" He climbed into the truck, started. The engine, Through the window, his face was a stranger's. You always said you wanted to live simply. And your chance. The truck kicked up dust as he drove away, leaving Sarah standing in the driveway in her pajamas, blood from her cut feet mixing with the gravel dust. She watched until the truck disappeared where their property met the county road, taking with it not just her husband, but every safety net she'd spent 2 decades weaving, a cow load from the barn Bessie, needing to be milked. But the milking equipment belonged to the business. The feed in the barn, purchased on the business account. Even the barn itself had been improved with business funds, making its ownership murky at best. Sarah sank to her knees in the gravel, the October wind cutting through her thin pajamas. 23 years. She'd given him 23 years. 3 miscarriages, 1 successful pregnancy, countless sacrifices. And he'd been planning this for months, methodically stripping away every resource while she'd been planning their future. The crunch of gravel made her look up. Tom had returned. No, it was their neighbor's truck, but it kept driving past, like everyone would once word got out. Once they knew she'd been too stupid to protect herself, too trusting to see what her husband had become. She forced herself to stand, feet screaming, and walked back to the house. The kitchen clock, her grandmother's, showed 9:17 a.m. 3 hours ago, she'd been a wife, a business partner, a woman with a future. Now she was just another abandoned farm wife with nothing but a mortgaged-free roof and the kind of shame that settles into your bones like winter cold. The envelope of divorce papers lay on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, saw the yellow, sticky notes marking where she should sign. So efficient, so thoughtful, so Tom. She fed the papers into the wood stove, watching them curl and blacken. It was the last fire she'd be able to afford to make for a while. The wood supply was almost gone, and the winter wood order had been placed through the business. As the papers turned to ash, Sarah looked around the kitchen. Empty pantry shed bin. Planning to go shopping today. Empty bank account. Empty bed waiting upstairs. Empty future stretching ahead. But first, Bessie needed milking. By hand now, the old way, the hard way. Sarah found her barn boots by the back door, pulled them on, over her bleeding feet, and stepped out into her new life. One where trust was a luxury she could no longer afford, and survival was the only currency that mattered. Chapter 2. The Valley of Shadows. The first night alone was the kind of cold that seeps through walls and settles in your chest. Sarah had managed to milk Bessie by hand, her fingers cramping and raw, producing barely a quarter of what the electric milkers would have yielded. The milk sat in an old mason jar in the powerless Refrigeratora monument to her new reality. Without electricity, the farmhouse became a different creature after sunset. Shadows pooled in corners where lamplight used to chase them away. The October wind found every crack in the century-old walls, whistling threats of the winter to come. Sarah lit the last 3 candles she could find, vanilla-scented ones from their anniversary dinner 2 months ago. Tom had complained about the smell. She wrapped herself in her grandmother's quilt and sat at the kitchen table, making lists by candlelight. Assets, house, no mortgage, 47 acres of land, 1 dairy cow, 12 chickens, maybe if Tom's lawyers didn't come. For them, root cellar with some preserved vegetables, old tractor, broken, well water, hand pump in the barn, immediate needs. Electricity payment, $347 past due plus deposit. Firewood for winter, feed for animals, food for herself. Phone bill, $89. Property taxes, due in December, $2,100. The lists blurred as tears fell. No savings, no checking, no credit cards all in the business name. She'd trusted Tom with the finances while she handled the daily farm operations. "You're so good with the animals, honey. Let me worry about the money." How many times had he said that? A coyote howled somewhere in the darkness beyond the windows. Bessie lowed nervously from the barn. Sarah should go check on her, but the thought of leaving the circle of candlelight paralyzed her. She'd never been afraid of the dark before, but she'd never been this alone before either. The house groaned and settled, sounds she'd never noticed when the refrigerator hummed and the furnace rumbled. Every creak made her jump. Was that footsteps, the wind, or just the sound of a house aging without maintenance? By the second candle she'd moved past lists to memories. The day they'd bought this place from her ailing parents, Tom promising to restore it to its former glory. Their daughter Emma taking her first steps in this kitchen. The dinner parties with friends who'd probably side with Tom had always been the charming one. The third candle flickered as she finally asked the question that had been clawing at her throat. How did I not see this coming? But she had seen signs, hadn't she? The separate business account he'd insisted on, the way he'd started password protecting his devices, how he'd stopped asking her opinion on business decisions. She'd explained it all away: stress, growth, the natural evolution of a marriage. Not calculated cruelty, never that. A crash from the barn shattered the silence. Years. The barn door hung open, banging in the wind. Inside, Bessie stood trapped in her stall, eyes rolling white with fear. The feed bin lay overturned, its meager contents scattered. Raccoons or desperation, she couldn't tell which had driven them to break in. "It's okay, girl," Sarah whispered, her voice strange in the darkness. "We're okay." But they weren't. The feed would last maybe a week. The hay in the loft might stretch a month if she rationed. And then what? Sell Bessie. She was the only source of milk, potentially butter and cheese, to sell at the farmer's market, if Sarah could get there without a vehicle. She secured the barn door with a piece of wire, the latch mechanism another casualty of Tom's business ownership. Everything broken, everything needing money she didn't have. Back in the house, the candles had died. Sarah fumbled her way upstairs in the dark, muscle memory guiding her to the bedroom. The empty space where Tom should be felt like a wound. She'd washed these sheets 3 days ago, still smelling faintly of the lavender detergent she'd made from their own plants. Another skill that might actually matter now. Sleep wouldn't come. Every sound was a threat. Every silence a reminder. At 3 a.m., she gave up and felt her way back downstairs. The kerosene lantern cast dancing shadows as she explored the root cellar, her grandmother's domain when the farm had been thriving. Dusty jars lined wooden shelves, pickled beets, green, beans, tomatoes, dates written in her grandmother's careful script, 2018, 2019. Still good, probably. A basket of potatoes, sprouting eyes, carrots packed in sand. Winter squash hanging in mesh bags. Not abundance, but not nothing. On the top shelf, wrapped in oilcloth, her grandmother's journal. Sarah had meant to read it someday when she had time. Time was all she had now. She brought it upstairs, settling back at the kitchen table as dawn grayed the windows. Her grandmother's handwriting, young and determined, October 12th, 1952, first winter, alone on the farm. Harold left me for that secretary. From Davenport, took the car, the savings, left me with debt and doubt, but this land is mine, passed from my mother. What he couldn't take, I'll make flourish. Today I sold eggs to buy lamp oil. Tomorrow I'll fix the chicken coop myself. Spring will come, and with it, hope. Sarah's tears spotted the aged paper. Different decade, same story. Her grandmother had survived, even thrived. The farm had been legendary in its heyday. People drove from 3 counties away for her grandmother's preserves and pies. A rooster crowed, not hers, the Johnsons from the next farm over. Soon people would know. The shame burned fresh, but underneath it something else stirred. Not hope, not yet, but maybe determination, or just spite. She closed the journal and looked out at her land as the sun painted the frost-covered fields. Gold. 47 acres. A cow. some chickens, a root cellar of preserves, and the ghost of a woman who'd faced this same dawn and refused to let it break her. Sarah pulled on her barn boots over yesterday's bloody socks. Bessie needed milking, the chickens needed feeding, and somewhere between survival and spite, she had to find a reason to keep going. Her grandmother had. Maybe the secret was in not looking too far ahead, just one chore, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. The hand pump in the barn groaned as she worked it, rust flakes falling like snow. But water came, cold and clear. She hauled it to the house, muscles already screaming. This was her life now, measured in buckets carried, eggs gathered, dignity salvaged from the ashes of trust. As she strained to carry the water, her wedding ring caught on the pump handle. She worked it free, stared at the gold band that had meant forever. Then she left it on the pump handle, a payment to the farm for water, a tithe to her new life. The sun climbed higher, but the cold remained, settling in her bones like a promise of harder days to come. Winter was coming, and she had nothing but determination and her grandmother's ghost to keep her warm. It would have to be enough. There was no other choice. Chapter 3. Seeds of Survival. November arrived with the first snow, delicate flakes. That would have been beautiful if Sarah hadn't been watching them through a kitchen window lined with frost on the inside. 2 weeks since Tom left, and she'd developed a routine born of necessity. Up before dawn to hand milk Bessie, haul water, feed the chickens with carefully rationed grain, then walk the 3 miles to town, seeking any work that paid cash. The K. Johnsons had hired her to help with their apple harvest, backbreaking work for $40 a day, but it kept the animals fed. Mrs. Chen at the library had let her use the computer to list items for sale online. Her wedding china, the silver her mother had left her, anything that could bring in money without destroying the farm's future. "You sure about this, honey?" Mrs. Chen had asked, watching Sarah photograph her grandmother's pearl necklace. "Just the jewelry," Sarah had replied, her voice steady now from practice. "Not the farm tools." Because she'd found them, her grandfather's tools, her grandmother's canning supplies, tucked away in the cellar and sheds like buried treasure. The old implements Tom had scorned as relics were now her lifeline. A manual seed drill. Hand. Tools for every purpose. Even an ancient butter churn that her aching arms had learned to operate. The first victory came small, successfully making butter from Bessie's cream and selling it to Mrs. Patterson at the general store for $12. Not much, but earned entirely by her own hands. "This is real butter," Mrs. Patterson had marveled, spreading it on a cracker. "Haven't tasted anything like this since I was a girl." "My grandmother's method," Sarah had said, pride creeping into her voice for the first time in weeks. The library became her university. Between computer sessions, selling possessions, she devoured books, small-scale farming, traditional food preservation, marketing for farmers, basic home repairs. Mrs. Chen started setting aside books she thought would help, slipping them to Sarah with a conspirator's wink. "Knowledge is free," she'd say. "Use all you can carry." Sarah carried home armloads, reading by kerosene light, until her eyes burned. She learned about heritage vegetables that commanded premium prices, about value-added products that could triple profit margins, about permaculture and season extension, and a dozen other concepts that transformed farming from mere survival to potential prosperity. The second small victory, fixing the chicken coop door herself, using techniques from a 1940s repair manual. Her hands bled from the work, but the door hung straight and true. "I did that," she whispered to the chickens, who clucked approval, but it was loneliness that nearly broke her. Days passed without speaking to anyone. The phone had been cut off. Friends had chosen sides, and Tom's charm had won most of them. Only her daughter Emma called from college, using the library's phone. "Mom, just come stay with me," Emma pleaded during one call. "My roommate won't mind." and abandon the farm. Let him win completely. Sarah's resolve hardened with each conversation. No, sweetheart, this is my stand. The first person to really see her was unexpected. James Murphy, the new veterinarian who'd bought old Doc Morrison's practice, arrived on a Tuesday when Bessie was acting sluggish. "I heard you might need help," he said simply, climbing out of a battered truck. "Doc Morrison mentioned you before he retired, said you were one of the few who really understood animals." "I can't pay," Sarah began, shame flooding her face. "We'll work something out." He was already examining Bessie, gentle hands checking her over. "Maybe some of that butter I've been hearing about? Mrs. Patterson won't shut up about it. Bessie just needed a mineral supplement, easily fixed." But James lingered, accepting Sarah's offer of chicory coffee. Real coffee was a memory now. "You're Harold and Ruth's granddaughter," he said, recognition dawning. "I've got one of her quilts. My aunt bought it at a church sale years ago." They talked about the farm's history, about her grandparents' legacy. James mentioned his own struggles starting over after his divorce, moving from the city to this small town where everyone knew everyone's business. "Sometimes starting over is the only way forward," he said, and Sarah felt understood for the first time since October. He returned the next week with the mineral supplement and a proposition. "I've got more house calls than I can handle. Need someone who knows animals to assist. Can't pay much, but it's steady." Sarah's first instinct was pride. She wasn't a charity case. But then she thought of her grandmother's journal, full of bartered services and community connections. "I'll earn it," she said firmly, never doubted it. Working with James introduced her to every small farm in the county. She watched, learned, absorbed knowledge about different operations, the Amish family who made cheese, the young couple growing microgreens, the widow selling herbal tinctures at farmers' markets. Each farm visit planted seeds of possibility in her mind. What if she could do more than just survive? The turning point came in late November. While helping James treat a horse at the Riverside farm, she noticed their greenhouse, a simple hoop house covered in plastic. "Built it myself for under $500, Mr. Rivera said proudly. "Grow salad greens all winter. Restaurants pay triple for local winter produce." That night, Sarah sketched plans by lantern light, using her library books as guides. She had some cattle panels from the old operation. Plastic sheeting would be the main expense. But if she could grow through winter, she started saving. Each sale hurt, but she forced herself to see them as investments, not losses. The first greenhouse frame went up on Thanksgiving Day. Sarah worked alone, hands numb with cold wrestling cattle panels into arches when the wind knocked down her first attempt. She sat in the mud and sobbed, one moment of complete despair. Then she got up and started again. Because the alternative was giving up, and her grandmother hadn't raised quitters. As the sun set on her half-built greenhouse, James drove up with a covered dish. "Thought you might want some Thanksgiving dinner," he said, not mentioning her muddy clothes or tear-stained face. They ate turkey and stuffing in her cold kitchen, and he listened as she explained her greenhouse plans with growing excitement. "It'll work," he said simply. "You've got the knowledge. You've got the determination. It'll work." That night, after James left, Sarah found a $100 bill tucked under his plate with a note. Not charity. Advance payment for a winter's worth of salad. Greens. Jay. She cried again, but these were different tears. Not the bitter tears of abandonment, but the overwhelmed gratitude of someone remembering what kindness felt like. The greenhouse stood complete by December 1st. Rough, but functional. Sarah planted her first seeds, lettuce, spinach, arugula, saved. From her grandmother's collection, as she covered them with soil, she thought of all the women before her who'd planted hope in dark seasons. "Grow," she whispered to the seeds. "Please grow." Because if they did, she could too. One seed, one day, one small victory at a time. Winter was here, but for the first time since Tom left, Sarah believed spring might actually come. Chapter 4. Unexpected Harvest. By January, Sarah's life had developed a rhythm that would have been unrecognizable to the woman who'd discovered her emptied bank accounts just 3 months prior. The greenhouse, patched with duct tape where winter winds had torn the plastic, sheltered rows of vibrant greens that seemed impossible against the snow-covered landscape outside. James had become a regular fixture, stopping by twice a week for his salad greens order and staying for coffee that gradually became longer conversations. He never pushed, never assumed, just offered steady presence in a world that had felt impossibly empty. It was his 8-year-old daughter who complicated things. "Dad, is this the plant lady you're always talking about?" Lily asked the first time James brought her along, her dark eyes bright with curiosity, despite the sadness that lurked in their depths, the look of a child who'd weathered her parents' divorce. "I don't talk about her that much," James protested, some color rising in his cheeks. "You said her lettuce was so good it made you want to write poetry," Lily countered, making Sarah laugh, the first real laugh in months. "It's very good lettuce," Sarah agreed solemnly, kneeling to Lily's level. "Would you like to see where it grows?" Lily's wonder at the greenhouse, warm and green while snow fell outside, reminded Sarah of Emma at that age, endlessly curious, delighted by simple miracles. They picked salad greens together while James watched from the doorway, something soft in his expression. "Can I help plant something?" Lily asked. Sarah found her last packet of cherry tomato seeds, saved from her grandmother's collection. Together, they planted them in old yogurt cups, Lily's small fingers patting soil with intense concentration. "You'll have to come back to check on them," Sarah said. "Tomatoes need attention to grow strong." "Like people," Lily said matter-of-factly, and Sarah's heart squeezed. They came back the next week and the next. Lily appointed herself guardian of the tomatoes, watering them with dedication. James helped repair the greenhouse where damage threatened, his veterinary hands equally skilled with tools. "I'm not looking for anything," he said one February afternoon, apropos of nothing, while they worked side by side securing new plastic sheeting. I want you to know that after my divorce I promised myself I'd focus on Lily, on building our life here." "I'm not either," Sarah replied, understanding perfectly. "I don't think I'll ever trust anyone with my heart again, or my finances." "Fair enough," he smiled sadly. "But friends who understand starting over." "Friends," she agreed, and meant it. Their friendship became the scaffolding for Sarah's expanding world. James introduced her to restaurant owners looking for local produce. Lily's enthusiasm for the farm drew them over most weekends, the little girl delighting in collecting eggs and brushing Bessie. "She's happier than I've seen her since the divorce," James confided one day, watching Lily read to the chickens from her schoolbook. "The farm has that effect," Sarah said, remembering her own childhood here. "It's honest. Animals don't lie or leave. Plants grow if you tend them. There's comfort in that reliability." By March, Sarah was selling microgreens to 3 restaurants, her greenhouse production supplemented by the eggs and dairy products. The mortgage was still secure, the electric bill finally reinstated, though she kept usage minimal. Every dollar saved was a dollar toward expansion. The real shift came when Maria Santos arrived at her door on a sleeting April morning, face puffy from crying. "Mrs. Patterson said you might understand," she began, clutching a baby on her hip. "My husband, he cleaned out our accounts, left me with 3 kids and nothing. I don't know what to do." Sarah saw herself 6 months ago, the shock, the shame, the paralyzing fear. She invited Maria in, made tea, listened to the familiar story. Of financial betrayal and carefully planned abandonment. "The first thing," Sarah said gently, "is to inventory what you do have. Not what you lost, but what remains. Can you garden? My mother taught me, back in Mexico. Then you can survive, and eventually thrive. Sarah hired Maria part-time, though she could barely afford it. But two women working together accomplished more than twice what one could do alone. Maria's knowledge of traditional Mexican farming techniques complemented Sarah's learning, and soon they were planning a salsa garden. Tomatoes, peppers, cilantro, onions, word spread. All the women started coming, some for produce, others for something harder to define. Sarah found herself sharing her grandmother's journal, offering cups of tea and hard-won advice about starting over. "We should formalize this," Mrs. Chen suggested. One day, having driven out with a carload of books on small business development, there are grants for women's agricultural cooperatives, the Blooming Fields. Women's Farming Collective registered as a non-profit in May. Sarah president, Maria, treasurer, Mrs. Chen secretary. They started with 5 members, pooling resources and knowledge. The moment that changed everything came during their 3rd meeting. Lily, who'd become the collective's unofficial mascot, was showing the women her tomato plants, now flowering in the greenhouse. "Sarah taught me that broken things can grow back stronger," she announced. "Like when you prune tomatoes, they make more flowers." James caught Sarah's eye across the room, and something shifted. Not a lightning bolt, but a quiet recognition. This man who'd shown up when she needed help, who'd never asked for more than she could give, who was raising a daughter to be strong and kind. Later, as they cleaned up after the meeting, their hands brushed, reaching for the same cup. They both froze. "I know we said we weren't looking," James began. "We weren't," Sarah agreed, "but maybe we found something anyway." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, in her kitchen where she'd first discovered betrayal. But this was different. Not passion born of naive trust, but connection forged through parallel losses and quiet rebuilding. "I won't rush you," he promised against her lips. "I won't run," she promised back. They took it slow, careful of their wounded hearts and the children watching. Lily bloomed under Sarah's attention, and Sarah found her heart expanding to include this motherless girl who collected eggs with reverence and read stories to seedlings. By June, the collective had grown to 12 members. They'd received their first grant, $5,000 for greenhouse expansion. Sarah stood in what had been Tom's home office, now converted to the collective's headquarters, and marveled at the transformation. The bank statements on the desk showed positive balances, small amounts but growing. The wall held photos of member families, planning calendars, seed catalogues. Where Tom had plotted her abandonment, women now planned their futures. "You did this," James said from the doorway, Lily on his shoulders. "Did this," Sarah corrected, including Maria, Mrs. Chen, all the women who'd refused to let abandonment be their ending. "Can we plant more tomatoes?" Lily asked. "The special ones for broken things that grow back stronger?" Sarah met James's eyes, saw her future there, not perfect, not without scars, but real and possible, and hers to choose. "Yes," she said, meaning more than just tomatoes. "Let's plant a whole row." Chapter 5. Seasons of Growth. By the 1st anniversary of Tom's departure, the farm had transformed beyond recognition. Where single greenhouses once stood, 3 hoop houses now sheltered rows of produce. The old barn hosted weekly meetings of the Blooming Fields Collective, its membership grown to 23 women, each with their own story of resilience. Sarah stood before them on an October evening, presenting the quarterly numbers. "We've distributed $47,000 in revenue among members this quarter," she announced, still amazed by the figure. The woman who'd arrived desperate 7 months ago now stood to present her own report. Their new salsa line had been picked up by 3 regional grocery stores. "None of this would exist without Sarah showing me that starting over wasn't ending," Maria said. "It was beginning." After the meeting, Sarah walked the property with James and Lily, now as much a part of the farm's rhythm as the seasons. They paused at the memorial garden the collective had planted, each woman contributing a plant that represented her journey. "What's yours, Sarah?" Lily asked, studying the plants. "The lavender," Sarah replied, touching the purple blooms. "It survives harsh conditions and makes everything around it smell sweeter." "Like you," Lily said simply, taking her hand. James squeezed her other hand, and Sarah felt the completeness of it, not the desperate merge she'd had with Tom, but a chosen partnership between two people who'd learned to stand alone first. The next morning brought the farm's biggest test yet. Sarah was reviewing grant applications when a familiar truck pulled into the driveway. Tom. He looked older, harder, his clothes expensive, but his face bearing the lines of someone running from consequences. Sarah watched from the window as he surveyed the transformed property, the greenhouses, the new signs for the collective, the obvious prosperity. She met him on the porch, no longer the woman who'd begged him to stay. "Sarah." He attempted his old charming smile. "The place looks good. What do you want, Tom?" "I need to talk to you. About Emma, about things." "Emma's fine. She's coming for Thanksgiving. Has a boyfriend you'd hate. Studies poetry." Sarah kept her voice level, professional. "As for things, my lawyer handles those discussions now." "Lawyer!" His mask slipped. "Look, Linda and I, it didn't work out. The business went under. Some bad investments, some issues with contracts." He stepped closer. "I was thinking maybe we could talk about reconciliation. I know I hurt you, but we had 23 years. "We had nothing," Sarah interrupted. "You made that clear when you cleaned out our accounts and left me to freeze. You seem to have done well enough." Bitterness crept into his tone, the charm failing. "I heard about your little collective, playing at business with a bunch of abandoned women. Not playing, succeeding." She smiled then, genuine and free. "We gross nearly $200,000 annually. We employ 15 women part-time. We feed half the county with clean local produce. What we built from the ashes of what men like you destroyed is more real than anything you ever created with your schemes and stolen money. I could fight you for half of this," he threatened. "Community property, try it." James appeared from the barn, Lily beside him carrying eggs. "Sarah's lawyer is prepared. Every document showing you liquidated community assets, every bank. Record of your theft. You'd lose, and publicly." Tom's face darkened as he recognized the threat. Small towns had long memories, and his reputation was already ruined from the business collapse. "You replaced me quickly enough," he sneered at James. "Nobody replaced you, Tom," Sarah said calmly. "I replaced myself, became someone who could never be left with nothing again. James is here because we choose each other every day, not because I need him to survive, but because surviving is better together." "Dad, who's the angry man?" Lily asked, studying Tom with the directness of children. "Nobody important, sweetheart," James replied, but his protective stance made his meaning clear. Tom looked between them, the family unit that had formed without him, the thriving business he'd never imagined, the woman who no longer needed his validation. And Sarah saw the moment he understood he had no power here. "I'll be going," he said stiffly. "Good choice." Sarah watched him walk to his truck, older now, the luxury vehicle long gone. "Tom?" He turned, hope flickering in his eyes. "The divorce papers. Sign them. It's time we both moved on completely." This drove away without another word, dust settling in his wake like the end of a chapter. Sarah felt James's hand on her shoulder, Lily's small fingers slipping into hers. "You okay?" James asked. "More than okay." She turned to face her chosen family. "I'm free." That evening, the collective held its harvest celebration. The barn glowed with lights strung by the women. tables groaning under dishes made from their combined gardens. Sarah's grandmother's preserves, the last jar, sat opened on the table, shared among women who understood legacy. Mrs. Chen raised a toast. To second chances and stubborn women. To learning that help isn't weakness, Maria added. To discovering that breaking can lead to blooming, another member chimed in. Sarah raised her own glass of apple cider, pressed from the orchard they'd restored together. To my grandmother Ruth, who showed me the way, to all our grandmothers, who knew that women's strength comes not from competing, but from connecting. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The stars were brilliant above the farm, no longer hidden by the city lights Tom had always preferred. James found her there, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. Lily asked if she could call you Mom, he said quietly. I told her that was your choice. Sarah's heart expanded, almost painful with the fullness of it. I'd be honored. But James, I'm not traditional wife material anymore. I'll never be financially dependent again. The collective, the business, this is part of who I am now. I wouldn't want you any other way. He pulled her close. I fell in love with the woman who built greenhouses in November and taught my daughter that strength comes from soil. Why would I want to change that? They kissed under the stars, a promise sealed not with naive trust but with earned faith. Inside, Lily was teaching the women a song she'd learned at school, her voice bright with belonging. Sarah looked at the farm, her grandmother's legacy, her salvation, her future, and saw not what had been taken, but what had been given. The chance to discover who she was when everything else was stripped away. The opportunity to build something that couldn't be stolen, skills, community, self-reliance, love that was chosen rather than desperate. Ready to go back in? James asked. Ready, Sarah confirmed, taking his hand. They walked back to the barn together, to the warmth and laughter of women who'd learned that the best revenge against those who'd left them with nothing was to build something beautiful from the empty space they'd left behind. Chapter 6. Full circle. 2 years after the morning that had shattered her world, Sarah stood in the same kitchen, watching snow fall beyond windows now properly sealed against winter. The morning light caught her engagement ring, a simple band bought with James's savings, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Tom had presented. This one meant more because she'd watched James save for it, had been part of the discussion about their future finances, had insisted on contributing to their wedding fund equally. Mom. Lily, now officially hers through love if not yet law, padded into the kitchen in fuzzy socks. Is today the day Emma comes home? Yes, sweetheart. Her bus arrives at noon. She'd visited several times, watching the careful construction of this new family. Hey, James. Hi, little sister. Lily glowed at the designation, shyly offering Emma a slightly squished donut. They drove home through a landscape transformed. Where abandoned farms had dotted the county, blooming field signs now marked thriving operations. The collective had expanded beyond produce, helping women secure land leases, access equipment, find markets for everything from goat cheese to cut flowers. I've been analyzing our numbers, Emma said from the back seat, her business training. Evident, if we incorporate sustainable tourism, farm stays, workshops, retreats, we could triple revenue within 2 years. She's definitely your daughter, James laughed, catching Sarah's eye in the mirror. At the farm, they found unexpected visitors. 3 women stood by a battered car, one holding a baby, all bearing the hollow-eyed look Sarah recognized too well. Are you Sarah Martin? The oldest asked. We heard you help women who've been left with nothing. Come inside, Sarah said simply. Let's start with tea and inventory what you have. As she led them to the kitchen, Emma fell into step beside her. This is what I want to build on, Mom. A formal program, emergency housing on the property, financial literacy classes, childcare during meetings, the business plan I wrote for my senior project. It's all about this. We'll present it to the collective, Sarah promised, pride swelling at her daughter's vision. The afternoon filled with familiar rhythms, listening to the women's stories, helping them see assets where they saw only absence, connecting them with collective members who'd walked similar paths. James took Lily to check the greenhouses, giving the women space for hard conversations. That evening, with the new women settled in the collective's emergency housing, converted outbuildings that members had renovated together, Sarah's family gathered for dinner. The table that had once echoed with emptiness now overflowed with food they'd grown, love they'd chosen, future they'd built. "I want to make a toast," Emma said, raising her glass of apple cider. "To Mom, who showed me that rock bottom can be the foundation for something incredible. To James, who proves that good men exist. To Lily, my bonus sister. And to all the women who'll sit at this table in the years to come, learning what we've learned, that being left with nothing just means you have room to build everything." After dinner, Sarah walked alone to the memorial garden, needing a moment with her thoughts. Snow dusted the dormant plants, but she knew what lay beneath. Roots, strengthening for spring's explosion of growth. A hand touched her shoulder. "James, the new women will be okay," he said, knowing her thoughts. "You've built something here that catches people when they fall." "We've built it," she corrected. "All of us." "Your grandmother would be proud." Sarah thought of the journal entries she'd memorized, the woman who'd faced this same cold with only determination for warmth. "I think she is. Somewhere, all our grandmothers are." They stood together in the snow, looking at the lights glowing from the collective buildings, the greenhouses, their home. Tomorrow would bring the wedding planning, the business expansion, the next woman needing help. But tonight, Sarah felt the profound satisfaction of promises kept, to her grandmother's legacy, to her daughter's future, to the woman she'd discovered she could be when everything else was stripped away. "No regrets?" James asked softly. Sarah thought of Tom, last seen in the local paper's bankruptcy notices, of the life she'd thought she wanted, safe, traditional, dependent. Of the woman who'd stood in a driveway in her pajamas, watching her world drive away. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Only gratitude. Because sometimes the end of everything is actually the beginning of what was always meant to be. And sometimes being left with nothing is the greatest gift. The chance to discover that everything you need to build a life already exists within you, waiting for the courage to grow." As they walked back to the house, Emma's laughter drifting from inside, the collective's lights twinkling like stars, Sarah knew that this chosen family, this earned success, this community of women refusing to be broken, this was wealth Tom could never have imagined, and it was hers, built from her own hands, her own heart, her own stubborn refusal to let abandonment be her story's end. The bank statements might never show millions, but her life overflowed with riches that couldn't be stolen in the night. She was home, she was whole, she was exactly where and who she was meant to be. Chapter 7. Harvest of Hope. The wedding took place on a June morning, 3 years after Tom's departure, in the meadow where Sarah had first planted her grandmother's seeds. The Blooming Fields Collective had transformed the space into something magical. Wildflowers in mason jars, ribbons fluttering from the apple trees, handmade quilts spread for seating. Sarah stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, wearing her grandmother's wedding dress, carefully altered by collective members who'd learned tailoring to supplement their income. The ivory silk, yellowed with age, told its own story of endurance. "You look beautiful, Mom," Emma said, pinning wildflowers. In Sarah's graying hair, she'd stopped dyeing it last year, embracing the silver as evidence of survival. Radiant, Maria agreed, adjusting the hem. The core collective members had gathered to help her prepare, their presence more meaningful than any formal bridal party. Through the window, Sarah could see James in the meadow, Lily dancing around. Him in her flower girl dress. He wore his only suit, bought second-hand, and tailored by Mrs. Chen's clever hands. Tom would have sneered at the simplicity, but Sarah saw only authenticity. "Are you nervous?" Patricia asked. "No," Sarah realized, with wonder. "I'm just ready." They'd written their own vows, crafted during long evenings at the kitchen table, discussing everything from joint accounts to parenting philosophies. No surprises this time, no hidden agendas. Just two people who'd learned to build love on foundations of mutual respect and radical honesty. The ceremony itself was deliberately small, collective members, a few town friends, James's sister from Oregon. But as Sarah walked down the aisle, a mowed path through the meadow, she felt the presence of all the women who'd walked hard roads before her, her grandmother's spirit strongest among them. 3 years ago, James began his vows, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I met a woman pulling water from a hand pump in a November freeze. She was fierce and broken and determined to survive. I offered to help, but the truth is, she taught me how to rebuild after loss, how to trust after betrayal, how to choose love as a daily action, not just a feeling." Sarah's own vows came from the deepest truth she'd learned. "You came into my life when I'd sworn never to depend on anyone again. You showed me the difference between dependence and partnership, between needing someone to survive and choosing someone to thrive with. You've never asked me to be less so you could be more. You've celebrated every success, supported every dream, stood beside me as I became myself. I choose you, not from need, but from want. Not for safety, but for joy. Not as my other half, but as my whole partner." Lily served as ring-bearer, solemnly presenting bands bought with profits from the collective's newest venture, the agritourism program Emma had developed. Simple gold circles, inscribed with "Planted together, growing strong. By the power invested in me by the state and this community of remarkable women," Mrs. Chen said, having gotten ordained online specifically for this moment. "I pronounce you partners in all things. You may kiss your bride." The kiss was brief but profound, tasting of apple cider and promises kept. The collective erupted in celebration, showering them with lavender from Sarah's first successful crop. The reception unfolded in the barn, transformed, with lights and flowers. Tables groaned under food prepared by collective members, each dish telling a story of cultural heritage and recovered strength. The wedding cake, baked by Sophia in the commercial kitchen, featured sugar flowers so realistic that bees tried to visit them. "I want to say something." Tom's mother, Eleanor, stood unexpectedly. She'd arrived alone, having divorced Tom's father years ago. "Sarah, when my son left you, I was ashamed. Not of you, of him, of what I'd somehow raised. Watching you rebuild, helping these women, creating this community, you've shown more grace than he deserved. Welcome to the family, James. You're the son-in-law I should have had all along." The moment could have been awkward, but Sarah simply hugged Eleanor, who'd sent quiet support through the dark months. $20 here, seeds there, always with unsigned cards. As afternoon faded to evening, the party moved outside. Children ran through the gardens while women shared stories and plans. The collective had grown to 50 members across 3 counties, their combined revenue approaching $1 million annually. But more than money, they'd created something unbreakable. A network of women who understood that rising together lifted everyone higher. "Dance with me," James whispered, pulling Sarah onto the makeshift dance floor as someone started the old CD player. They swayed to Patsy Cline, surrounded by fairy lights and fireflies. Through the crowd, Sarah glimpsed the newest members, three sisters from Tennessee, fleeing generational poverty. They'd arrived last month with nothing but determination. Already they were planning a medicinal herb operation. "No honeymoon?" James asked, though he knew the answer. "This is my honeymoon." Sarah gestured to the thriving farm, the celebrating women, the future growing in every direction. "Besides, we have the Sustainable Agriculture Conference next week," he laughed, spinning her. "Only you would find. Farm conference is romantic. Only you would marry someone who does." Emma caught the bouquet, wildflowers from every collective member's garden, and immediately announced she was too busy expanding the business to use it. "But I'll save it for whichever collective member needs luck next." As the party wound down, Sarah found herself in the greenhouse where it all began. The original structure still stood, patched and weathered but functional, surrounded by newer, larger houses. Inside, Lily's first tomato plants had become a producing jungle. "Found you," James said, joining her in the humid warmth. "Just thinking." About how Tom leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me." She turned to face her husband. "Not the pain. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But the breaking open, the discovering, the becoming. You would have been amazing regardless." "Maybe, but I would have been amazing in a smaller box with someone else holding the key." She touched a tomato leaf, releasing its sharp green scent. "Now I'm amazing on my own terms." They walked back to the house together, past the commercial kitchen where tomorrow's workshop would teach refugee women traditional preservation techniques. Past the children's garden, where Lily had insisted they plant a sister plot for Emma. Past the memorial garden, where Sarah's lavender had spread into a purple sea. In the kitchen, they found a note from the collective, Sarah and James. "While you celebrate, we're maintaining the farm. Animals fed, plants watered, tomorrow's market prep underway. This is what family does. Enjoy your first night as officially partnered partners. Your collective family." They organized shifts, Sarah marveled reading the schedule. "Everyone's taking turns, so we can have 3 days just to ourselves." "Brilliant women," James agreed, pulling her close. That night, in the bed where Sarah had once cried herself to sleep, she lay beside James listening to the farm's peaceful sounds. Somewhere, an owl called. The wind rattled the windows they'd fixed together. The house itself seemed to breathe with contentment. "Tell me about tomorrow," she said, "their old game of planning dreams. Tomorrow, we wake up together, make coffee, feed the animals because you won't be able to help yourself, schedule or no schedule. You'll check the greenhouse. I'll collect eggs. Lily will demand pancakes. Emma will have 17 new business ideas before noon. And after that we build more greenhouses, more programs, more women learning they're capable of anything. You'll probably save someone new. Before lunch. We'll save them," she corrected. "We'll save them," he agreed. They fell asleep, entwined, no longer broken people clinging together for warmth, but whole people choosing to share their completeness. Outside, the farm slept too, ready for tomorrow's growth. In the morning, Sarah woke first, slipping out to walk her land in the dawn light. Dew silvered the grass, birds sang from every tree. The gardens sprawled in organized abundance, feeding not just bodies but spirits. At the memorial garden, she knelt by her lavender, now massive and fragrant. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. "We all did it." The sun rose over blooming fields, painting the greenhouses gold, warming soil that would nurture seeds that would become plants that would feed women who would grow strong enough to plant their own seeds. An endless cycle of growth and giving, of breaking and blooming. Sarah heard the house waking, James calling for her, Lily's laughter, Emma's voice on the phone already organizing something. Her family, her choice, her life. She stood, brushed soil from her knees, and walked back to embrace it all. The girl who'd stood in a driveway watching her world disappear had become a woman who'd learned the secret her grandmother knew. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover you already have all you need. The seeds of your future self, waiting in the dark for the courage to grow. And grow she had. Not just survived but thrived. Not just recovered but revolutionized. Not just healed but helped heal others. The harvest of her hardest season had yielded the richest crop, a life lived on her own terms, love chosen from strength not need, and the unshakable knowledge that no one could ever again leave her with. Nothing, because she was no longer someone who could be left. She was someone who stayed, who built, who planted, who grew. She was rooted in her own soil, reaching toward her own sun, blooming in her own time. She was home.